I am a big comic book fan, and as I've gotten older and become nostalgic of the comics I grew up reading as a child through my college years, I decided to reopen that collection and read them again. How do I feel about these comics today as an adult? Find out in this episode of My Comic Book Journey. Contest of Champions, Volume 1, Issue 1, June 1982, Marvel Comics. The story is by Mark Gruenwald, Bill Mantlo, Stephen Grant, with a script by Bill Mantlo and pencils by John Romita Jr. It was 1982 and I was only a 10-year-old kid with only a few dollars to spend on comic books. I can actually remember clearly. I left the party that my parents took me to, walked to the only store that sold comic books at the Navy base, and I picked up 3 comic books: an issue of Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and Contest of Champions. The series literally was the epitome of everything that was good at the time for a young Marvel fan, seeing the popular and iconic Marvel superheroes all on the front cover. If it was available back then, I would have begged my mom to purchase a poster-sized version of this cover to hang up in my bedroom because I loved this issue so much. Reading it again, many decades later, memories of my childhood and buying this issue came back to mind, but reading it again, I was quite content. But I can't deny there were quite a number of cheesy 80s moments, but also realized how much writers tried to fit in there in terms of political context and sexual innuendo, as subtle it may be. The first issue of Contest of Champions revolves around a wager that the Grandmaster and the hooded being known as the Unknown had made. In an effort to save his immortal brother known as the Collector, the Grandmaster waged that if he wins the Contest of Champions, his brother would be restored. If he loses, both he and his brother lose their powers and will be cast out to oblivion. As Earth's mightiest heroes, not including the mortal human and humans, many Atlanteans or aliens from all over the world are whisked away to an unknown place, the humans of Earth are put in stasis. If the heroes do not fight, the humans will be kept suspended in time. As far as cheesiness goes, you have the words of the time, such as the Beast saying to Captain America, "It's just such a gas to be in the Avengers Mansion," or Spider-Man saying, "It must be kismet for him and Spider-Woman to meet again." And immediately I remember saying this to myself as a kid. What is kismet? I remember this scene. "Well, Vanguard, Crimson, Dynamo, either of you have any idea where we are?" Obviously, a sport-time arena, Iron Man. "You wear the emblem of Great Britain, and you the green of Ireland." Shamrock and Captain Britain divided by their country's enmity, eyeing each other suspiciously. Meanwhile, the two had once been lovers and are reunited. "Hello, Dark Star. It's been a long time since you left the Champions. I like your new costume." "Thank you, Iceman. I thought of you often and fondly since then." Others in the vast arena meet and discover they share a common bond. Most humans shrink from the idea of awareness in a machine vision, even superhumans. Yes, among mutants, monsters, and man-gods, we artificial life forms are still the least accepted. So, it was quite interesting to see Shamrock and Captain Britain giving each other the eye. At the time, I didn't understand the conflict between both countries, so it was quite interesting for me to see that certain panel featured. Also to see Bobby Drake as the playboy that he was back then, and his relationships with women. Of course, times have changed, as Bobby Drake is a different person today. And with today's comic books becoming more inclusive of races, sexuality, religion, and readership, reaching out to many demographics, the change of direction in today's comic books is aligned with today's social atmosphere, as it was back then in the early 1980s. And it made me think, what if Contest of Champions was released today? Would it be more darker, more violent? Would political lines between superheroes from other countries be more pronounced? Needless to say, the chosen heroes to battle things out for this miniseries was really quite interesting. And so the selection process of champions by champion until the Grandmaster and the Unknown stop at their versus at 12 players each. From Russia's super soldiers such as Darkstar and Vanguard Canada's Sasquatch, Japan's Sunfire, China's Collective Man, Ireland's Shamrock, Britain's Captain Britain, Saudi Arabia's the Arabian Night, Germany's Blitzkrieg, Israel's Sabra, Argentina's Defensor, France's Peregrine, and Australia's Talisman, and of course you got Wakanda's Black Panther to take part in the battle. This is what caught my attention as a child, the fact that there were so many superheroes from other countries other than the United States and Canada featured in a Marvel comic book. And even today, reading it again, I'm impressed with Marvel's writers at the time pushing for an inclusion of superheroes from other countries for this limited series. I know the battles don't start until the next issue, but still, the first issue of Contest of Champions is still an important part of my childhood. If Contest of Champions does have any recognition in Marvel history, it was the first limited series for Marvel showcasing a major event that shook up the entire Marvel universe. And as many writers are pushing for inclusion of race, religion, and sex, I think it's been long overdue to see another major Marvel storyline to showcase superheroes from all over the globe in a single setting once again. 1982, Justice League of America, Volume 23, Issue 207, October 1982, DC Comics. Written by Jerry Conway. Artist features Don Heck and Romeo Tanghal. Letterer Ben Oda. Colorist Carl Gafford. Plot consultant Roy Thomas. Editor Lynn Wein. Another issue from 1982 that I remember very well. As a fan of the Justice League of America, Justice Society of America, and the All-Star Squadron, to have this team up of 3 teams from different worlds was quite amazing to me. And here I am, many years later, rereading this first part of a multi-series crossover, and once again, enjoying it. Before I confuse anyone, this is the best way to remember things. Earth 1, the timeline of the Justice League of America, Zatanna, Superman, Aquaman, Firestorm, Hawkman. The Earth timeline that most people are reading in a comic book. Earth 2, the timeline of the Justice Society of America, Dr. Fate, Green Lantern, The Huntress, Power Girl, Starman, and the All-Star Squadron, which features Firebrand, Johnny Quick, Liberty Bell, Robot Man, Steel. Earth 3, the Earth where there are no heroes but only supervillains, and the crime syndicate are the most powerful, which includes Superwoman, Owlman, Ultraman, Power Ring, and Johnny Quick. Earth Prime, the Earth where superheroes are only what people read in comic books. As for the JSA, they transported into the prison of the crime syndicate. Of course, they are not going to be there all that long, but when they reach Earth Prime, the whole city has been destroyed in a major holocaust. What happened to Earth Prime? With that being said, as the JLA are able to regroup, they go out looking for the JSA in Earth 2. But what they discover is something bad that has happened on Earth 2. For the most part, Jerry Conway did a fantastic job with the overall writing for the story. The only thing that dates this book, aside from the brown pages of this comic book that I have, is the Firestorm's reference to Rick Springfield, which most people who live through that 80s music era will understand. For those of you who don't, do a Google or YouTube search on Rick Springfield's 80s hit, Jesse's Girl. And my memories of this was my aunt would send me and a friend walking over a mile to go out and pick up her latest issue of 17 magazine with Rick Springfield, as she was a hardcore Rick Springfield fangirl at the time. And she would give me extra money for me and my friend to use it on slushies. And with the extra money, I would purchase a comic book or two. Anyway, leaving the 80s nostalgic scene and Rick Springfield behind, I had to say that the JLA-JSA crossovers were always something that I always look forward to reading. And I do miss those times of reading Jerry Conway stories. With that being said, I was reading through the letter section and the letters addressing the controversy of artist Don Heck taking over taking over George Perez, and how Heck would receive so much hate because of DC's comparison to him and the legendary Perez. That was really interesting to read, and I could only feel for Don Heck for being put too high on a pedestal, and then everyone expecting Perez's style of artwork. So, I know that was way back in 1982, and not sure how Heck felt about it, but for the most part, it's very difficult trying to replace someone such as Perez or taking over the reins for the artwork. But with that being said, I was unaware of the drama as a kid from the artwork that I saw by Don Heck and Romeo Tanghal. Both did a wonderful job with the artwork for these JLA issues. And overall, the Crisis on Earth Prime Book 1 storyline from Justice League of America issue 207 from October 1982 was quite cool. And if you could find the issues of the storyline featured in JLA, JSA, and the All-Star Squadron, you'll definitely enjoy it. Check it out. 1987. Ex-Mutants Volume 1, Issue 1, Spring 1987, from Amazing Comics. The authors David Lawrence, penciler Ronald Lim, inkers Timothy Dizon, with Michael Witherby, calligrapher Bob Pinaha, script assist and editor David Campiti. I recently wrote about Malibu Comics' first issue of Ex-Mutants, originally created by writer David Lawrence and artist Ron Lim, along with editor David Campiti. In the 1986, Ex-Mutants was first published by Eternity Comics for issue 1, and then Amazing Comics for issues 2 through 5. But due to contractual problems, the remainder of the series moved to Pied Piper Comics from issues 6 and 7, and then a one-shot publication, which led to a legal dispute. And while the title returned back to Eternity Comics for a different set of issues, 6 and 7, with Lawrence and Lim no longer involved with comics, Eternity Comics, which became an imprint of Malibu Comics, would release a 15-issue series titled Ex-Mutants Shattered Earth Chronicles, along with an annual and a special issue. While the series would end in 1990, back in 1992, Malibu Comics' Malibu Interactive and Sega would release an Ex-Mutants video game for the Sega Genesis. To tie into the video game, Malibu Comics would release a reboot of Ex-Mutants, which the setting would remain the same, which is war decimating a planet, while the characters and storyline would be different. As I've covered back in the 1992 Malibu Comics first issue, this time I will talk about the Amazing Comics Ex-Mutants Special Edition issue 1, which was released back in spring 1987. Ex-Mutants Special Edition is a remake of the first issue from Eternity Comics, with more pages in order to improve the original storyline a bit more. So you get Ex-Mutants issue 1 with new material. So that's a major positive compared to the banal reprints that we often see from major comic book companies. Ex-Mutants Special Edition 1, issue 1, begins with a man named Alex who is busy studying the underground lab blueprints. His beautiful wife is leaving for a 6-month assignment, and as he watches her plane fly out the next morning, 9 weeks later, the world ended as 2 wars and nuclear destruction wreaked havoc on Earth. Fast forward 30 years from now, and humanity has changed due to the radiation and where people became mutants. Emmanuel Cugat is the son of Alex, who is featured in the beginning of the story looking at the lab blueprints. He finds a compact solar battery, which he uses in his father's lab. Emmanuel is able to bring on the rebirth of the human race by turning 5 mutants to humans, which include Aaron, Belushi, Vicky, Angela, and Laurelie. As Emmanuel would put these humans through intense training, he plans to unveil the rebirth of the human race by introducing 5 Ex-Mutants. But instead of winning the crowd, the mutants go under attack against Cugat and his Ex-Mutants. What caught my attention to this series is Ronald Lim's wonderful artwork, but also how entertaining David Lawrence's Ex-Mutant is with the action and life in a post-apocalyptic planet. And in the rebirth of these 5 Ex-Mutants, and with 4 women and 1 man, I think you can get the picture of what will happen. Needless to say, fan service and sexual innuendo are seen in the pages of Ex-Mutants. The biggest difference versus from its 1992 counterpart is how the Ex-Mutants came to be, especially the characters. Of how the Ex-Mutants came to be, especially the other characters. So, the Malibu comics balance out the characters list with 3 men and 3 women, while this version features 1 man and 4 women. And suffice to say, the male Belushi is quite blunt with his "I just want to run, jump, and get laid" when asked by Aaron about looking human. Needless to say, I do enjoy the original much more than the Malibu comics as far as the first issue is concerned, but because they have the same name and they both take place after the war and mutants turn to human, aside from that, the entire story is quite different. Overall, it's an enjoyable, slightly more mature series worth reading. And this completes the pilot episode of My Comic Book Journey. I'm your host, Kennedy, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.